to the Drew Sutton Leadership Show, lighting the way with real leaders, real stories, and real impacts. Because when leaders stop growing, the darkness wins. All right, welcome back to another amazing episode of the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. On today's show, we're going to be answering the question, what happens when you sell your business? That's the goal for most of us, but what happens when we actually achieve it? Well, you realize you have no idea how to live without it. To answer these questions, Allan Crockett is here. Allan is a national best-selling author and founder of Kairos Telos, the Kairos Telos project, where he is helping high-performing entrepreneurs answer the question no one prepares them for. Who are they after the exit? After 20 years advising ranchers and family businesses, Allan created the CAP framework to help leaders replace the post-success void with clarity, alignment, and purpose. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Allan.
Thank you, Drew. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, man. So I'm super pumped to have you on the show. We got to put together, I think we got put together by Michael DeLon, who was on the show recently.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a couple of things that I love about Allan. So as you're listening to this, Allan has done it for real. He's out there. He's done ranching. He's taught ranchers how to make money. In the cattle business, it can be a little bit difficult. So he's already an expert, but he's a man of faith, and he's helping folks figure out what does life look like post exit. It's kind of a new twist for him here in the last year, but it's so needed. And the reason I wanted him on the show is, of course, we need to help the silver tsunami occur correctly. We need to buy small businesses so they don't end up in the hands of BlackRock and Vanguard and the other giant megaliths. But that leaves a whole generation of baby boomers and Gen Xers that are going to have to answer this question. So I'm super excited to have you on the show, Allan. Tell me, what do you do for fun? You're a rancher? Are you into guns? Are you into golf? Are you into flying? What do you do for fun?
Golf? No, I don't. I've never golfed. And interestingly enough, I do have some rancher friends that golf, which is kind of ironic to me. But yeah, I'm a pilot. I like to fly. Also, I'm into guns. I like shooting. I don't do anything competitive, but I do like to just shoot. It's shoot targets. I enjoy it and trying to improve the skill. That's what it is.
Yeah, I got into firearms. I've always been pro firearm. I was in Boy Scouts. I did the things, but I got into firearms about 5 years ago for me. Like, I started really buying my own and then started stretching my legs a little bit and seeing if I could reach out that 300, 400 yard mark. That's where I'm at right now. Is I want to improve my 400 yards. It's like golf with a bang.
Yeah, I'm a little ahead of you there, I guess, because I like reaching out to about 1,200 yards. So that's a long target, but it's interesting because you can see it through the scope. You can see the target move, and then you 1, 2, 3, bang! You finally hear the echo of the target. It finally comes back far enough to you so you can hear it. But yeah, even at 400 yards, that's good.
Yeah, that's I do church security. Like, I just volunteer at the church and I do church security, and then those guys got me into it. And I think that 2A is important, but I think everybody should get out there and actually put a couple of rounds through their firearm. It's a hoot, and it's a skill that I think every American should have. Tell me about
I agree with you. Yeah.
Tell me about your pilots. The old joke is that do you know how to tell if there's a pilot at your party? Oh, he'll tell you.
Yeah.
Right after the CrossFit guy's done talking. So tell me, how'd you get into aircraft?
I have always liked flying, and the last chapter of my book, I talk about this, but my wife and I both started at ground school, and we had found a plane we were going to buy. This is 35 years ago or more now, maybe 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 35 years ago. We found a plane we were going to buy, and I'd been flying a lot with a friend of mine, and he called me one day, and he says, hey, he was a mechanic, and I was running a ranch, and I needed a new engine for a piece of equipment. And he says, hey, I found that engine. I'll fly down the ranch. We had a landing strip at the ranch. I'll fly down there, pick you up, and we'll go look at it. We'll fly over to Phoenix where it's located and look at it. And I just got this really sick feeling inside. And I said, Joe, let's go another time. Let's go next week. He's okay. I can do Wednesday. And so we set up for Wednesday, and I never give it a second thought. But he crashed his plane and killed himself that day,
Oh
and
no.
terrible accident. And so I quit the ground school. I quit flying. I just, I'm not going to do that. And then I was working with a client up in Montana, and she was a pilot and had come home to take over the family ranch, and she had flown for the airlines. And she said, Allan, it's not too late. We got to talking about flying and that. She's not too late. And after about the third time she told me that, I realized it's not too late. And so I did. I went and got a pilot's license. I don't own a plane. I will, but I don't own one today. And I love flying. I mean, there's some freedom when you get the air, and things you can do and things you can see and stuff. And it's a challenge, but it's also, to me, it's very relaxing, being up
Yeah.
there and flying. So I love it.
Yeah. No, my dad was a veterinarian, and he had a friend that was a pilot, and he took me up. I was probably 9, maybe 7. So I was pretty young, but I got to hold the yoke. And I still think about that today sometimes. Like it's a new world. It's very cool.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's bring us back down to earth here. You were a cattle rancher for a number of years. I mean, a long time. You had success, and then you've been coaching cattle ranching. Um, but now you've pivoted in the last year to helping people figure out what's next. So tell me the moment where you realized, I need to start up the Kairos Telos project because this is a real need. Tell me that moment that you
Yeah.
knew you were called to this.
There was a turning moment, but let me give you a little bit of backstory first.
Please do.
I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather retired, and he turned the business over to my dad. We had cattle and farm and whatnot, and I didn't. They had that, and I remember my grandpa telling me, he says, I got more tired the first year in retirement than I ever did when I was working. And he went
Yeah.
and bought, yeah, and he went and bought some calves and put them in some corrals and started feeding them to give him something to do, a purpose, a reason to get up and get going in the morning. And so that's where it first started. And then later, as I was working with some ranchers, I found ranchers that were 80 years old and still calling the shots, and they had a 50-year-old son that they would not turn the business over to. And it's not that they didn't trust their son. What it was is they had seen their neighbor turn the business over to the son and retire, and they died within 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Out of sheer boredom. There was nothing to do, and they just died.
Yeah.
And so they were scared, I guess you could say. I don't want to turn this over to my son, because what am I going to do besides die? And I don't want to die yet, so I want to keep working. And so those thoughts have been in the back of my mind for a lot of years. And then here, a year or so ago, I started having this feeling that I needed to go this direction. And I fought it, I resisted. It just didn't make sense. Well, what do I want to go do that for? I'm happy doing what I'm doing. And it seemed like the harder I pushed back against it, the stronger it pulled me forward. And so I finally said, okay, all right, if this is what I'm supposed to do, then I'm going to do it. And what I have realized is there is a huge need out there. There's a lot of people that are business brokers helping with M&As, mergers and acquisitions and that kind of thing. But nobody's helping people, and I shouldn't say nobody. There's a handful, but basically there's a whole bunch of people helping you sell your business, but there's hardly anybody helping you figure out what's next. And to me, if you don't figure that out, you're just going to drift, and it's not going to be fun.
This is, I remember you said this when we first met each other. We were kind of talking about what we do, and it struck me so hard because I deeply believe. So what I'm doing is I'm on the other side of that silver tsunami. I'm buying businesses. That's what I'm doing. And I had never really seen it through the eyes of the seller. My grandpa sold to my dad sold to his partners. So I kind of saw it tangentially, but I was a kid. I wasn't really paying attention. But no, from my thesis is basically that the job is the most important social thing that we've ever come up with. It's God's gift to us to give us work to do. It's where we develop our professions and our passions. It's where we come up with provision for our families. It's where we give value to our peers. The job is more than just a money thing. It's an identity thing. And I think there's a lot of people that are like, oh, you need to separate your identity from your job. Nah, I mean, this is what you do. This is what you're spending most of your life doing. I think you should be deeply engaged with it. And then the question is, now what? Right now we're moving on. Now what?
And I'm glad you brought that up, Drew, because I was in a conference in Scottsdale back in January, and a lady on stage said that she and her husband had sold their business years ago. And she said, it took my husband years to recover from that sale.
Yeah.
And the reason it did is because his identity was tied to the business. And without that separation, it's like, well, who am I now that I'm not running my business? Who am I now that I'm not the CEO or the entrepreneur? Who am I? And that's the thing that he wrestled with all those years, that he could not come up with the answer. It took years and years, is the way she put it.
Yeah. And it's not a trivial thing. It's not like, well, because I think there's lack of sympathy. Like if you've successfully exited your company, I mean, that means you were hustling, you built something worth somebody buying, you successfully negotiated that exit at a good price. Like that puts you in the top 1% of folks in America, which is really impressive. Maybe 0.1%. And now all of a sudden you fall into the retired category. Now I come from engineering, and I got to watch several of my mentors retire, and it was the same things from them. They went from being, the 80-hour week, the entire company rests on their engineering solution to this critical problem, pressure for 30, 40 years straight. And then you take that pressure off, and they're happy for about 6 months, and
Yep.
then a lot of them pass. And if they don't pass, they kind of go into this living zombiehood. Um, tell me a story about where you saw this, or maybe you've seen this with your clients. Maybe you went through it. Tell me, give me some humanization of this actually occurring.
Yeah, that zombiehood that you mentioned. I mean, what, you either pass or you go into zombie. I mean, what's worse? Living as a zombie or just not living at all. Uh, it's really interesting. I had a couple here come to my office, and I think they were from North Dakota, but it doesn't matter where they're from. Anyway, they came here, and we're working on their business, the financial side of it. They just weren't as profitable as what they wanted to be. And she was really quiet, husband and wife, and she was really quiet. And I finally turned to her and I called her by name. I said, what do you want? And she says, I want us to retire while we're still young enough to travel and enjoy life together.
Yes.
And it was really interesting because there was silence in the room. And I kind of leaned back, and he turned and he looked at his wife. She's sitting right there, and he looked at her. And probably, I mean, it seemed like a long time, but it's probably 5 or 10 seconds he looked at her. And then he said, so do I. And so they were here for 2 days. And the first half to 3/4 of the day, we were working on profitability and really making this business do what they wanted the business to do. And for the next day and a half or day and a quarter, whatever was left, we structured the sale of their business, how they were going to sell it, how they were going to 1031 a bunch of that money into other assets that would provide them income, what they were going to do, and what their hobbies were, and who they were going to become. And I think that's the main thing. Who are you going to become now that you're not the entrepreneur, now that you're not the CEO of a business, now you're not the leader of a business? Who are you? And who are you going to become? And who do you want to become? And it just unfolded in a really natural way. He contacted me, probably 3 or 4 months after they were here, and everything was in motion. I mean, they'd sold some stuff, they 1031. I knew some places where they could put some money. And I'm not a financial advisor. That's not my gig, but I have some connections with some people in oil and gas investments and livestock investments and things. And I mean, last year their livestock investment returned them 30% ROI.
We may need to have a chat after the show.
That's
pretty good. That's pretty good.
Darn good, yeah. Anyway, he called me and he says, we're making more money in retirement than we ever made working, and we're having a whole lot more fun. But the reason they're doing that is because they had a purpose on a direction that they were headed. And if you don't, then you're just stuck.
No, I love this. And you say this to me all the time, which is you're not retiring from something, right? That's the escapism mindset. And I mean, I think a lot of times the jobs that we have in America are not where we want to be and spend our time. So we need an escape. But you're not retiring from something, you're retiring to something. So you're not giving up your purpose. You haven't completed your purpose. Your purpose is moving to the next chapter. And I think it's such an interesting an important thing to think about. It's a good change of mind.
Uh,
As you have clients that are doing this, what are some of the really cool things that they've discovered that they can retire into?
Well, for example, if in your case, you're a former engineer, you've been a leader. Okay, the Drew Sutton leadership show that we're on right now, you're a leader. So if you look at that, uh, I've had some people that have started mentoring younger people in their same profession
Mhm.
and helping them avoid some of the mistakes that you and I made early on in our careers. You don't have to do it like that, because if you do, here's what the result's going to be most likely. But if you
Right.
do it this way, you can avoid that mistake, and all of a sudden, we learn from our mistakes, but it's a whole lot easier if we learn from somebody else's and not have to make that mistake and go through that learning process that way. So just mentoring other people. I've had people that have gone on church missions and
Mm,
third world countries and help people there. Uh, People think, well, I want to golf, I want a vacation. And like you said earlier, all right, for 6 months, that's pretty fun. And now
right.
what?
And now what?
The mentoring thing, giving back. Uh, I think giving back is a huge thing. I think another way. I mean, you talk about what you're doing, and if I just sold my business for $10 million, just to grab a number out of the sky, it could be 20 million, it could be 3 million, but what would happen if I took 10% of that money and invested it in what you're doing to help small businesses stay active and stay locally owned and locally controlled? And yet, not only did I invest some money in that, but as a former entrepreneur or CEO or business leader, what if I volunteered some of my time to help some of these people grow that business and become successful in it? How rewarding is that?
No, this is I often pitch what I'm doing as a new model. It's kind of the alternative to private equity. It's the alternative to the ESOP or the buyout or the close. But the truth is, it's an old method, and depending on the context of the folks we talk to, sometimes I'll say it's a ancient Middle Eastern method, but really it just comes from the Bible.
Yeah,
And the idea is, throughout all of human history, the elders were sitting at the gate. So the folks that had farmed the land, that had been the merchants, that had done the thing, they're sitting at the gates and they're watching the comings and goings of the town. And they're kind of making judgment calls. They're like, hey, listen, this is not a good thing. This is a good thing. You need to be taking a break. How's your wife? And so community was a little tighter. And I think that we made the world flat with all this social media and technology. And what we've lost is purpose. We've lost the ability to say, hey, there is a spot once you retire. I you can't see them. I have some books over here on marketing. Obviously, social media marketing is a big part of business today. But that is a funnel to get cattle moved through and processed. That's what the social media funnel is. And it doesn't have a spot for the person that's retiring, right? That, well, you're not, maybe I want you to come and buy my community or something, but I have cattle and I'm trying to process cattle. But that's not the way business really is supposed to be. Business is supposed to be about us as humans giving to each other and offering value and building each other up. And so your comment here of retiring to something and finding that way to give back to your community. I remember being 28. My mentor was an 80-year-old. Deeply, deeply appreciated all the wisdom that Tom gave me. So tell me, all right. So we've talked about the need. We know what needs to happen. Sometimes you need somebody to help you figure out how to sell, and you do that already. Sometimes you need to figure out what are you going to do after you sell, and you do that now. Um, how can folks get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to start paying attention and start following you?
well, I think the best one. I mean, you to my website, allancrockett.com. You can look on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn. Again, just search Allan Crockett on LinkedIn. You'll find me there. The when you were talking about your mentor, that it and the elders at the gate and that kind of thing, it brought to mind a story, an experience I had, and I'll share the experience with you.
Hmm.
I was teaching a 7-day school or workshop up in Billings, Montana, several years ago, and we were talking about succession planning and how a lot of times the younger generation does not want to come back into business for whatever reason. I think sometimes they saw mom and dad just working their tails off, and it was all work and no play kind of thing, and maybe they didn't make much money. So why do you want to come back to something that's all work and no money and no play? And so they left. They didn't come back to that business. And there was an elderly guy sitting over here on the left side to my left, and then the right side of the room to my left. And I just called him by name, and I said, take Terry there for example. Let's say he didn't have any kids that want to come back. And I looked back to the far right corner, my right, and there was a young man, and call him Joe.
Yes, I love the story. Yes.
And I said, what if Terry over here didn't have any kids want to come back to his business, and Joe back here, he was mid-20s, and he's looking for an opportunity. What if they came back together and said, hey, I can help you and you can help me, and we can work through this because I'm getting older and I'm slowing down, but I can teach you the ropes so that you don't make the same mistakes I've made, and I can help you be successful in my business, and eventually you could own it. And at the next break, this elderly gentleman came up to me and he said, how did you know? I said, how did I know what? He said, how did you know that that's why Joe and I are here at this workshop? We're here because that's what we're doing. I said, I had no idea. I just looked over here and I picked you, and I looked over there and I picked him. And it happened to be that's exactly why they were there, because as it turned out, the older gentleman, Terry, he had no children. He and his wife weren't blessed with any children. They couldn't have any children. And he knew this kid from the time he was a pup, the time he was born. He knew him in the same community, probably went to church together. I don't know. But he saw him and he says, I'm in need of somebody to take over my business. I don't need the money. And I have experience, and I can mentor and help and coach you. And here's somebody that's looking for an opportunity. Let's put the two of you together. And they just did that on their own. And so I think there's some things in there. You talk about purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, what a fulfilling purpose to look back at the end of your life on your deathbed and said, I helped this young person be successful. I helped them get a start in life. I helped them not make the same mistakes I made in business or in life. And to have that kind of feeling on your way out, to me, that's powerful.
No, I love that. Like I said, I got to watch my grandpa pass the business to my dad, and my dad then passed the business to his partners. Now my dad has a farm in Tennessee, so not quite a ranch, but not unlike a ranch. I think we have about 100 head of cows. And about 20 years ago, he adopted a guy named Josh. And I say adopted, there was no legal paperwork, right? We're all adults, but Josh has become part of the family. I don't know for a fact that Josh is in the will. I would be stunned if Josh is not in the will. For 20 years, Josh is a part of the family. He's the fifth kid. And I think that is a beautiful, I was talking to somebody about marriage about 2 years ago. And I said, what's amazing about marriage is not the idea of finding the one, but rather discovering that we can all make the person we found the one, right? It's the activity of growing together and serving one another. That's really the beautiful part of life. One of the exercises I do with my clients is, I'll have them do a eulogy. I'll have them do a funeral for themselves. Who's going to show up at your funeral? And we talk about your spouse and we talk about your kids. And I always talk about the kid that doesn't belong to you, right? The kid that's outside of the family. Who else is showing up to your funeral that you made part of your family? And that maybe is the most exciting of all the relationships. So yeah, I love what you're talking about. Finding that purpose after you sell, it's not over. We still need your help. And we still, and there's still a very rich spot in the community for you that we need you in.
Absolutely. We don't need you on the golf course every day. You want to go golf once or twice a week, we'll go golf once or twice. Your expertise and your knowledge and your wisdom is needed by the younger generation. And some of the younger generation may not realize how much they need that, but they do. I just 2-3 weeks ago, I had a middle-aged man here in my office, a client, and we worked together for a couple of days. That's typically when I work with somebody one-on-one, it's usually kind of a 2-day deal, and then, face-to-face, and then we work ongoing from there. But he was here and middle-aged and had been married and divorced, had no children. And his big question is, why? Why am I doing this? Well, that's what we're talking about is purpose. And he says, sometimes I have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. Why? Well, so one of what reminded me of this is one of the things I said, okay, let's talk about your funeral service and who's speaking and what are they saying about you. And so he started talking about how he wanted to help younger people learn and grow. I mean, he's in his 40s. He's not like your mentor that was 80 years old. He's in his 40s, but he says, this is one of my goals is I want to help younger people. I said, so who are those younger people that are speaking at your funeral? What are they saying? And all
Yeah.
of a sudden his why started opening up and his purpose became clear. And I mean, that took, it took a couple of days it's a
Oh
very
yeah.
simple process, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. Simple and easy are not synonymous terms. And as an
No.
engineer, you know that.
Right. E equals MC squared is pretty simple. It's not easy. Um, so talk to me about this. You have this wealth of experience from clients that have been in this position, that have been in the transitioning position, folks that have businesses that need to be made profitable and they need to figure things out. What are some of the key phrases that folks tell you that lets you know, yep, they need to start asking the purpose questions. They need to start figuring out what business beyond or life beyond business looks like. What are some of the friction points that you hear all the time?
I think one is there's some fear involved, and
Oh yeah.
people don't want to admit that, but there's fear involved. I'm getting ready to sell my business, or I just sold it, and I thought it was going to be great to sell it. I was going to have all this free time, and I'm scared now. And
Yeah.
sometimes fear is because I don't have anything to do. And like you saw the older people in your field, and I've seen, if there's nothing to do, what do? We veg and we die. And
Mhm.
that's no way to end. I mean, I want to go out with my boots on kind of thing, I
Yeah.
want to go out living life. And I don't want to do it for the next 30 years, but when I it needs to be exciting. I don't want to be laying around with nothing to do on board, so I guess I'll die. So I think fear is something, and people won't express that, but it will come to the surface as we talk. All right.
Yeah.
The the identity loss is another one.
Yeah.
Well, who am I now that I am not the CEO of this company or the COO, or I'm not the entrepreneur, I'm not the business owner anymore. And maybe, you sold a business when you were 25 or 30 and you started another one and you sold it. And now you just don't have the drive at your age. I don't want to go start another business, but I don't know what to do. And so I'm lost. I'm disoriented. It's almost like I climbed to the top of the mountain and I had a map and the map guided me and I made it to the top. And now there's no map how to get down the other side.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here looking and it's great. The view's beautiful, but now what do I do? Where do I go? And so there's that loss of purpose that comes from a loss of identity or a fear factor that's involved or anything along those lines. And so if that's where you're at or you're concerned I'm going to be there, then we need to have a conversation. But if you've got 2 weeks ago I had a conversation with a guy in Oklahoma and he said, yeah, I've sold my business. I sold it to an employee. None of my kids wanted it. So I sold it to the employee. I'm working in the business still with him 2 days a week. And he bought a ranch. He said, I'm working at the ranch the other 3 days a week. And he says, I am really excited. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going. You don't need me. If that's you,
Right.
you don't need me. But if you're sitting there and you're thinking, now what am I going to do? To me, if we're quiet long enough and we kind of tune in, we will realize a lot of times that our biggest contribution is still ahead of us. It's not behind us, it's still ahead. And that's the contribution like the 80-year-old that was mentoring you, or
Yeah.
this old man Terry that's going to mentor Joe, whatever his name was. That's talk about a contribution to giving back. You don't need the money. You made money. You sold the business, or you were a CEO and made millions. You don't need the money. So how can I contribute? Well, I could donate money here and there. Well, whoop-de-doo. Maybe get your name on a plaque at the hospital, because donated some money or something. And I'm not. That sounded
No. Actually, I
belittle,
actually I
belittling.
like this. Yeah, I talk about this all the time. We're both from the church world, and I say about November we start talking about Abraham, And then late November, we talk about David. And so we basically build up a legacy thing so we can start our giving campaign about the first week of December. But we use legacy a lot of times as a guilt trip. Legacy can be a a self-centered thing where we're saying, "Hey, I want to leave my legacy," as opposed to an externally focused thing that says, "Hey, what sort of legacy is my life going to leave?" Right? One says, I want my name on a building," and the other one says, "I want to make sure all those little engineers in that building have a building to meet in." Right? There's two kind of different things.
I was talking to a friend of mine in Idaho Saturday morning, or it was about 5:30 my time, and an hour ahead of his time. But he was driving, and we were having a conversation, and he brought that up. He says, "What are we really building that's going to outlive us and continue once we're gone?" And that's the thing. To when I look at legacy, even if you strip all the physical assets aside, the money, the cars, the guns, the airplanes, whatever it is, let's just put all that aside. The 30 patents that we had, or anything, the book we wrote, put that aside. What's left now? And what that is relationships, and who did I influence so that they had either a better business or a better life or both? And how was that influence felt and perceived, and what did I do that caused that? Because that, to me, that's what it all boils down to. And so when I look at it, yeah, great. I sold my business for 10 million. Let me give 10% of that to you and what you're doing to keep small businesses going. But more important than the money, let me come in and help mentor some of these people so that business stays successful, grows, and they are successful, and they appreciate in the end what I did, so that they'll turn around and do it to the next generation.
Yes, that's so yeah, what I'm doing with Jubilee Capital, the concept is there's two money systems. There is the consumption money system or the greed money system, which is it's kind of what the our whole system works on right now. We work on debt. Debt's not terrible, but it works on debt. I think it really kind of let the dog off the chain with Jack Welch in the 80s when he said it's all about shareholder value. And he boiled business down into a machine that makes sure that the stock price rises all the time. Now, certainly we need to make that stock price rise, right? That should be a measure of the value we're adding to the world. But are we a caretaker, or are we taking for ourselves? Are we a gardener, or are we greedy? And this is beautiful with your line of work and with your clients is your ranchers. Now, whatever you build today is what your kids or your grandkids are going to inherit on that piece of land. You can drill for oil. Maybe that has some toxic ashes. Maybe it doesn't. You can build a silo. You can build a pond. You can build a fence. You can change the land while it's in your hand, but your kids are going to be the victim of whatever you choose to be. Now, hopefully that they're a victim of great ideas, right? Hopefully we're building forward. But if we can change our mentality from this is for me, I'm going to consume the things that I get to, or this is for the generations down the road. I'm the caretaker of this land for right now. I think that we would do a lot of things differently. Like if you knew that you had to circle back to your land in 100 years, I don't know how many Walmarts we would have sold to. I don't know how many city dumps would have been sold to if we knew that, hey, that land is the land you have to come back to. And so for your clients here that are exiting, yeah, if we can start building, there's an old guy that said, put your money where your mouth is, or where your money is, there your heart will be also. If you want your heart to be in your community and your purpose to be in the community, start investing in your community, and you will find yourself very interested in the things that are going on.
Exactly. No, it's interesting, this whole idea of legacy. I think that this guy that I just mentioned that was here a couple of weeks ago, he said, when we're talking about his eulogy and who's there and who's, he said, I want to live life. I want to live life in such a way that my 8-year-old self would be proud of me.
Yes.
And I'd never heard it put that way. We look back, well, I'm proud of the things I did, but I want my 8-year-old self to look forward and be proud of what I've built and what I've done. That has to be way more than assets, physical assets, money in the bank, stock holdings, et cetera, et cetera. it has to be my contribution to the world. My contribution to the world starts with how I can contribute in my community and who I can help there and help them. It it's you know, I've talked for years about quality of life, and with quality of life, we have to have time and money, and we have to have them together in tandem.
Yeah.
If you have time, you're retired, and you don't have any money. I had an old friend of mine years ago. I said, "Well, how's retirement?" He says, "Allan, it's like being on vacation and no money to go anywhere." So he didn't have the money side of it. He had retired, but there was no money. Social Security, maybe a little pension, but not enough to do anything. So we need those. And when we're working, sometimes we have lots of money, but there's no time to go do anything. So we need those two in balance. But on top of that, for quality of life, we got to have relationships that are strong and getting stronger. That starts in our family, in our faith, and in our community. And then that fourth one that we've been talking about is purpose. And there has to be
Mm.
a purpose, and there has to be a purpose beyond just the business world or the business that we've created. That purpose becomes really important. Recently, I've added a fifth one to that, and that's health.
Yeah.
Because what do you want to live to be 90 or 95 if you're going to spend the last 10 or 15 years with Alzheimer's and somebody changing your diaper or something? I mean, what kind of life is that? So health span, and I focus on that a little bit with some of the people I work with is, hey, let's eat right, let's exercise, let's get outdoors, let's spend some time doing some things so that our mind is invigorated and our bodies are invigorated, and hopefully our spirit is invigorated in the process also. But if any of those get out of balance, if our health gets out of balance, everything else is gone. If we die, it's left. If we don't have purpose, then we die. If we have time without money or money without time, there's a problem. If we don't have relationships, I had a client that they become friends and from north of the border up into Canada, and they've been here. He's been here 3 times. His wife's been here with him twice, and he was an oil and gas entrepreneur, sold several
Yeah.
businesses, bought a ranch, and uses to sell the ranch. He was easy to sell the other business, and his wife just made the comment. She says he spends more time at the ranch than he does with me anymore. And so we talked about quality of life. She referred to it as agricultural marriage counseling, and I am not a marriage counselor. I'll tell you that right up front. But I can help people. I can help people get a quality of life, and for a husband and wife, especially when they're retired, let's find one that we're together on, that we agree on, because it's there was a guy here in town. He passed away a few years ago, but when his youngest graduated from high school and went off to college, and he's probably 15 years older than me, I asked him, what are you going to do now? He said, well, I guess we'll find out if me and Karen are still compatible. Speaking of his wife, that's not her name, but we'll find out if me and Karen are still compatible after all these years of chasing kids around and doing all this other stuff and work. Well, there again, if you've gone to a job and if your wife's gone to a job and you come home and you meet in the middle for supper maybe, or you go to bed and you get up and you go do it again and you have some weekends together, all of a sudden now we have all this time together. We better be compatible,
Yeah.
and compatibility is we have a shared vision of our purpose, our time, our money, our relationship, our health, those things, that quality of life. We're focused on that. And maybe that doesn't mean that, you and your spouse, we have to do everything together all the time, but it does mean that we're on the same page in what we're doing.
Well, you say that, and we have a family joke. My dad retired, and then my mom waited 2 more years to retire, but she didn't really need to retire. Like she works as a dental hygienist in a very small town in rural Tennessee, and so if she retired, there would have been a gap there. So she was really staying at work for the community. But we used to tease her. We were like, I think she's telling you, Dad, that you need to go to counseling before she retires. 'Cause to your joke about are they still compatible? Yeah, that was kind of a family joke for a long time. No, it's true. It's true. If you don't have relationships, what are you playing this game for?
Yeah.
The other
Same.
joke, my hunt. Go ahead.
Well, this same guy, his wife said I was an agricultural marriage counselor, which is not true. But This same guy told me, he said, in his former world, the world he came from, the oil and gas world, he says at least 50% of my former colleagues are divorced and have no relationship with their children.
Yeah.
And you look at that and it's like, you got to sit back and think about that, because where's the legacy in that one?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about community, and investing in the community. Your mother was invested in her community as a dental hygienist. We talk about the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, and how they can meld together, and not necessarily on top of each other, but people that have sold a business or retired and made money that could contribute to you and what you're doing. You're into that, and mentor some of those people. That's a huge contribution that could blend there. But at the same time, that purpose has to be clear, and our spouse, provided we're married, our spouse needs to be in alignment. What good does it do us to make this big impact in the world when we lost our home life, we lost our family because we were so focused someplace else?
Yeah.
And to me, that's sad, and we need to fix that. And so those relationships, especially, going forward, after the exit, if you've exited, you probably have kids and you probably have grandkids, and they probably need to be part of that picture. And if those relationships weren't strong, then what are you going to do now to strengthen them? And I can tell you this, money ain't going to buy it. It
No.
might in the beginning, but long term it won't. So they want your time, they want your heart, they want your mind. They want you to be present with them when you're having a conversation, not listening with this here, but my mind's already working on the next business deal or something. They want you focused on them. And that's sometimes we got to go back and repair that.
No, it's true. It's true. I love your friend that says, am I living in a way that my 8-year-old self is proud of? I actually, with my clients, I do the same thing. I say 20-year-old self. Probably for a guy, there's not a lot of difference between the 8-year-old self and the 20-year-old self.
Yep.
But then I also say I have to live in a way that my 80-year-old self is proud of. In fact, I say that you're holding your 80-year-old self hostage right now, because the 80-year-old self doesn't really care about the mountains you climbed. He cares about the relationships that you built. And your
Yep.
8-year-old self cares about the mountains you climbed. And you got to live in you got to keep both of them happy all the time.
Yep.
One of the questions that I work with my team on, generally I come in, we solve a business problem the first month or two, and then my clients will tell me what's really, the things that are really broken in the back, and we work through those things. And then eventually, so we're about 9 months into the contract at this point, and I generally pose this question: would the people that are closest to you, that's your key employees, your spouse, and your kids, would they choose to hang out with you if you didn't make the money that you make now? In other words, is it your money and your power that is keeping the people in the orbit, or is it the relationships that you've built? Because at some point you're going to exit. Now, I'm talking about, I'm meeting people here and the exit's far in the future, but you're meeting folks at that spot there. What's your best advice about how to live the last few years of that relationship so that when folks don't have to say yes, boss, to you anymore, they still choose to show up and say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what that boils down to is, if you're the boss and I'm working for you, number one, and this may sound corny to some people watching this, but I have to love you and you have to love me. And that love has to go beyond a paycheck, beyond a project, beyond a presentation. It has to be genuine, that if I'm 40 years old and you're my boss and I killed over, dang, I got to replace Allan. Who am I going to replace him? Am I got to go hire somebody? Or is it deeper than that, that I got to talk to Allan's wife. I need to talk to his kids. I need to make sure they're okay. I need to see if there's ways I can help them. Maybe not only through this, or maybe one of the kids needs to be helped, set up in business somehow, and I could do that. I think, to me, Drew, that's the difference. Um, you die, you're the boss, and you die, or you sell the company, you exit. Is it? And I'm glad he's finally out of my life. I've had all of him I ever wanted to have. Yeah,
Yeah.
if that's the deal, then there wasn't much of a relationship there. It was a project, a presentation, a paycheck.
Yeah.
But if it's, golly sakes, I'm going to miss him. How am I going to survive without him? And Drew, if you go shooting on Saturday, I want to go with you because I'm off on Saturday. So let's see if we can stretch it out to 500 yards from 400 yards.
Yeah.
Or some, and we have that kind of relationship. That's beyond business, and to me, that's business is important. When I was working with a lot of people, helping them make their business more profitable, one of the things that I realized is, in order for the business to become more profitable, there had to be a mind shift. We had to change the way we think, shift our paradigms, and in order to do that, sometimes we have to go way back in our subconscious mind and stop telling ourselves stories that we've told ourselves for years.
Yeah.
There was an old joke, how do you make $1 million ranching? I'll start with 5 million.
Yeah, okay. I've heard a version of that.
Just and yet it doesn't. It shouldn't be that way. I mean, you make $1 million. All right, now let's make 5 million. Now let's make 10, and it should be growing. But in order for that to happen, that mind shift of this is a loss, I'm here for the lifestyle or whatever, that has to happen. And it even goes back, we're talking about the elders at the gate and things like that. If you read the New Testament, it's easier for a camel to get through an eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven. And you think, a needle somebody's sewing with in the eye, you put the thread, well, that's impossible. There's no way a camel can fit through that. But if you take that in context, the wall around Jerusalem had a gate called the eye of a needle. And the camels had to get on their knees, and you had to strip the pack off of them. They could get through. You put the pack on the other side, and they could take it down to the marketplace, or vice versa if you're leaving. So if you think about that, well, it's not impossible. It's not easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than a rich man to get in. Because if you think of that, well, I don't want to be rich because I want to go to heaven. And I worked with a young couple several years ago, and every time they started becoming profitable, they self-sabotaged.
Yep.
Because of that mindset. And so if we take that to post-exit, what's the mindset? Well, I am the CEO. I am the entrepreneur. I am that guy. Wait a minute, I'm not him. Well, who am I now? And if you don't know that, if you don't know who you are without the business, that gap is going to kill you if you don't fill it, if you don't figure it out. It's going to get filled with somebody else's priorities, somebody else's ideas of what you ought to be doing in retirement. It's not going to light you up, most likely. And you're going to get discouraged and you're going to want out, and it's not going to be good. And I think let's fill that gap with what your true purpose in life. And if it's pulling you forward and calling you forward, hey, I can help you with that.
Yeah. Well, we're getting a little bit late. I mean, the show's been a great show. I've super enjoyed having the show. We're longer than normal. I want to take a moment. I want to talk about your book. So do you have a copy of your book right now?
Right here.
Beyond Business Success. What a great title. Beyond Business Success, because there's so many layers to that. And of course, you're talking about beyond the exit, but also you spend a career helping people make a profit. What are you most excited about for that book? Why did you write that book, and why should we read it?
I think the thing about this book that I'm most excited about, after the exit, what's next? Because I firmly believe that the majority of people after the exit, now, and I say the majority, let me rephrase it, the majority of business leaders, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Whether you're a CEO, CFO, COO, something like that in a big company where you've led people and led a business, or whether you're an entrepreneur and you've built business or businesses and sold and et cetera. After the exit, what's next? Because I think that there is something beyond business that is deep inside of each one of us that's pulling us forward if we'll allow that to happen. You know, the old analogy of, racehorses have blinders on it to keep them focused ahead.
Yeah.
If you watch an old Western movie, the horses on the stagecoach or the buckboards or whatever, they have blinders so they didn't get distracted looking at things. We've got to take those blinders off now, and we got to say, okay, what is out there that would really light me up? What is out there that is my true purpose in life at this point that would really, really provide some fulfillment for me? Let's discover what that is. After that, we can put the blinders back on and focus on that. But in order to do that, we got to get the blinders off. It goes back, Drew, to when I first started consulting work, it was a lot about profitability, a lot about ecology and building soil health and grass productivity and that kind of thing. But I realized for those changes to take place, the human being behind those changes had to make some internal changes, had to change the way they think. And so the same application goes after the exit. That's why this book was written, to help people after the exit figure out what's next and have clarity about that. And if you don't, you're going to veg, and if you veg, you're going to die. And
Yeah.
you're not going out on a high, you're going out on a low, and that's not a good place to leave on.
No, 100% no. Yeah, no, I love it. Okay, you have an event coming up here. Well, tell me about your event.
Yeah, it's a 2-day event. It's for entrepreneurs and business leaders, business owners that have exited or are about to. And we're going to spend 2 days together. We're just going to be talking about the things that you and I have talked about right now. What's next? And let's get clarity on that. The CAP thing that you mentioned in the beginning, clarity, alignment, and purpose. And if we don't have clarity, then we'll just drift. If there's no compass pushing us, drawing us forward, guiding us, we'll just drift whichever way the wind blows, which way we're going to go. So let's get clarity, alignment first with your own inner self, and then with your spouse, if applicable, your family, and then what's your true purpose now? What's your calling going forward? Let's figure that out so that you can have that fulfillment and excitement and get out of bed, get up and get going in the morning kind of attitude and feeling.
I love it. Absolutely love it. CAP, clarity, alignment, and purpose. I think we all fill our heads with noise so that we don't have to acknowledge our lack of clarity, our lack of alignment, and our lack of purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that may be the single greatest benefit to the binging of Netflix is it prevents us to have to wrestle with those questions. Well, we're out of time here. I know that you've said a lot. I'm going to give you 2 more minutes just to speak anything you want to the audience. The floor is yours, and we're going to wrap up.
Well, first off, thank you, Drew, for having me. I've really enjoyed being on your show and visiting with you. It's been a great dialogue. To the people out there listening, if you're in a position where you're about to sell a business or retire, or you have retired or sold a business, and you're the fork in the road, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And, where do you want to go? And if you're not sure about that, if you lack the clarity of what's next in life, then reach out to me, because that's where my skill set comes into play. And I can help you figure that out. A real quick story. I was working with a business owner several years ago, and his COO was in every meeting that we had. And we're wrapping up a meeting in his office, and he says, "Well, what's our next step, Allan?" I said, "What do you think it is?" He says, "We always get to this point and you don't tell us what to do." And I said, "I'm not going to tell you this time either." And he was irritated.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you that because if you come to a 2-day event, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I will lead you to discovery. This same guy sent me an email the next day. He says, "After you left, Joe and I were talking. We wouldn't have it any other way." And I think that's the key. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you who you are, but I can lead you to discovery so that you can discover who you are and discover what your purpose is going forward. I can help you figure that out.
I love it. I love it. Listen, if you're about to exit, if you have a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan and you say, listen, I know that the silver tsunami is coming. I'm part of that 81% of businesses in America that are going to be retiring or exiting in the next 10 years. 81% of all the businesses in America are owned by Gen Xers or baby boomers. That means in 10 years, you're looking for an exit. Now is the time to start reading books like Beyond Business Success. And that's here at the beyondbusinesssuccess.com. Oh, that's the Tucson event. Excuse me. Here's just the beyondbusinesssuccess.com. You can go to allancrockett.com, and he has an amazing 4-minute video, super well put together, that will help you get an idea of what direction to take next. Reach out to Allan. Tell him you saw him on the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. He's going to help you find that clarity, alignment, and purpose over the next couple of years so that when the exit time occurs for you, you'll be ready. You're not going to retire from something. You're going to be retiring to something. And that's a much more exciting second chapter to your life. And in the process, he'll probably tell you how to make a lot of money. So call Allan, tell him you saw him on the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. He's got something special for you. He's going to send you a copy of his book, and get ready for surfing the silver tsunami rather than being rolled over by it. With that, Drew Sutton, we are.